Before we begin, let me make one thing absolutely clear. Chris Dallas supports President Trump. This is not a hit job. This is not a betrayal. He's been a believer since the 80s, long before the politics, long before the rallies, back when it was just about a man who built things and spoke his mind. He backed 95% of what the man's done, and if the election were held tomorrow, he would still vote for him. But Chris Dallas isn't blind, and he's damn sure not for sale, because when something stinks, no matter who's in power, no matter which side of the aisle they're on, Chris calls it out. That's the promise of this channel. That's the promise he made to you. And what he uncovered here. This stinks. It's the smell of corporate manipulation, of billion-dollar handshakes, of laws being changed with a smile and a signature behind closed doors. This is a wake-up call from someone who believed. Still does, mostly, but now, with eyes wide open. There's a photo that stuck in Chris's mind, a moment frozen in time that didn't feel right. A long, polished table, crystal glasses, the quiet hum of immense power. And seated at the head, Donald J. Trump, the man who promised to take on the swamp, the man who raged against the machine, now breaking bread with the kings of big tech, Meta, Google, Microsoft, OpenAI. The whole digital empire, the architects of the very censorship he fought against, were all lined up in fawning gratitude. One by one, they stood and said, "Thank you, Mr. President." They praised his pro-business, pro-innovation leadership. Some called it respect. Some called it a necessary part of governing. Chris saw it as something else entirely. He saw it as the start of a transaction. A quiet negotiation where the terms weren't written on paper, but paid for with influence. And it was not a cheap one. Chris remembered Trump's stance from the first term, the fire, the righteous anger. He called big tech enemies of the people. He filed lawsuits against their monopolies. He threatened antitrust actions that could have broken them apart. He took a swing at the digital giants that were actively trying to silence the nation and rig the narrative. He was the crusader we had been waiting for. Then something shifted. The fires seemed to dim. The lawsuits dried up. The federal investigations quietly disappeared. The rhetoric softened from a roar to a whisper. The smiles returned. Chris saw it, clear as day. All it took was a few $1 million donations to an inaugural fund, a few private dinners, and suddenly the crusader who was supposed to be storming the castle looked more like a concierge, holding the door open for the very people he had sworn to fight. Let's look at the evidence Chris found. Case in point, Meta. Mark Zuckerberg's empire was under serious fire. They were being investigated by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau for illegally harvesting financial data, for violating the privacy of millions of Americans. It was a serious case with serious consequences. Then came the $1 million check. Chris found the trail. It's not a secret, it's public record, if you know where to look. Meta donates a cool $1 million to Trump's inauguration fund, and suddenly the investigation, it vanishes, gone. No press release, no accountability, no trial, no headline, just a quiet dismissal. A handshake, a photo op at a dinner, and a clean slate for one of the most powerful corporations on earth. That's not justice. That's money talking, loudly. And what about Google? Trump's first term hit them hard with a landmark antitrust lawsuit. And for good reason. They had a monopoly on search, a monopoly on web browsers. They were controlling both the question and the answer for the entire planet. They lost the case, sure. The court found them guilty. But the punishment? It was laughable, a fine they could pull from their corporate glove box with no real changes to their business model. But then came the twist Chris couldn't ignore. At that same dinner, Trump, smiling, turns to Google's CEO and congratulates him on the victory. He even says, "Don't forget, Biden was the one that prosecuted that lawsuit." It was a moment of public alignment, a signal that the war was over. That wasn't the fighter Chris remembered. That wasn't what the movement had signed up for. The pattern continues. Tim Cook, the head of Apple, wrote his own personal check. $1 million. Straight to the inauguration fund, a generous gift. And not long after, what happened? The tariff exemptions, the ones that were supposed to bring manufacturing back to America, started rolling in. specifically for smartphones, for computers, for the very chips that Apple imports by the millions, billions of dollars in savings for Apple. Chris dug into the timing, into the sequence of events, the donation, the private meetings, the policy change. And what he found was undeniable. Tim Cook bought more than just a seat at the table. He bought policy protection. He bought a carve out from the president's own signature economic plan. In plain English, that's a bribe with better branding. It's the swamp just wearing a different suit. And while these mega corporations were getting their gifts, who was getting left behind? The American consumer, the very people Trump had championed. Chris laid out the evidence, piece by piece. Microsoft's antitrust probe? Gone. Amazon's investigation for deceptive practices? Quietly settled for pennies on the dollar. The airlines? They wrote their checks, and suddenly the new rules that would have forced them to compensate you for delays and cancellations were dead on arrival. This wasn't the guy who was supposed to be fighting for the little guy. This wasn't the president who was supposed to be holding these corporate giants accountable. But when you follow the money, when you trace the donations to the policy changes, the truth writes its own story. And Chris, reluctantly, wrote it down. It wasn't just big tech. The corruption was everywhere. $5 million. That's what Pilgrim's Pride, one of the largest chicken producers in the country, gave to the inauguration. Their biggest political donation ever. And what did they get in return? Weeks later, the USDA quietly rewrote the rules to let chicken processing plants speed up their production lines. More injuries for workers, more shortcuts on safety, less oversight. Chris found the connection. He saw the donation and he saw the policy change. It wasn't about making food safer or more affordable. It was about rewarding a donor. It was about profit, pure and simple. And the message was clear. Unless you had millions to offer, your voice, your safety, it didn't matter. The list goes on. ConocoPhillips, Chevron, NVIDIA, Boeing. They all opened their wallets and they all walked away with miracles. The AI chip bans to China, a matter of national security, suddenly lifted for NVIDIA after $1 million donation. The freeze on new drilling on federal lands reapproved for the oil giants. The tariffs that were the cornerstone of the America First agenda quietly removed for the companies that paid up. And Boeing? After their planes were literally falling out of the sky, the DOJ lets them off the hook for criminal prosecution. They paid a fine, and then almost immediately they got a new $50 billion defense contract to build fighter jets. Chris followed every single thread. And the picture that emerged wasn't America first, it was donors first. And of course, the crypto world didn't miss the party. They poured in millions and they got what they paid for. New laws that legitimized their industry, probes dropped, even a Trump-backed meme coin. But Chris knew the darkest money wasn't even visible. It was hidden behind shell companies, fake PACs, and non-profits with patriotic-sounding names, but no paper trail. Names like Election Freedom, Inc. and Axe Capital. Sound familiar? Of course not. That's the point. The real buyers, the ones with the dirtiest hands, always hide in the shadows. And Chris dug through every corner he could to try and bring their names into the light. Chris Dallas is still with the movement. He still believes in the cause. He still believes in the man he first saw in the 80s. But belief doesn't mean blindness. It can't. He supported Trump long before the rallies, long before the noise. He saw a man with guts, with vision, with the will to fight a corrupt system. But what this shows, what he uncovered, is that even the strongest fighters can get too close to the money. That the swamp has a way of seeping in, even when you're trying to drain it. Chris isn't pulling the plug. He's not abandoning the fight, not yet. But his trust isn't unconditional anymore. It can't be. He's watching. He's hoping. And he's holding the line not just for one man, but for the principles that started this movement in the first place. For all of us. Now let me tell you something about Chris Dallas. He's not some keyboard warrior chasing clicks. He's not bought. He's not scripted. He's the voice behind celebrity recreations, the guy writing what others are too afraid to say. Chris has been following Trump since the 1980s, back when admiration was built on strength and vision, not slogans. He believed in the man, in the mission, in the promise to fight for the forgotten. But after seeing how deep the corruption runs, even on our own side, Chris had to face a hard truth. Maybe all billionaires really are the same. Maybe in the end, they don't protect the little guy, they protect each other. He hasn't jumped ship. He's still watching, still hoping for the fighter he once believed in. But now, with a clearer, more painful view, this is Robert Davi and Chris Dallas. This is Celebrity Rep Creations, and the truth still matters, even when it's ugly. Davi out.